Alright, so in this video we're going to talk a bit about debugging in Vivado. I'm going to talk about some of my recommendations for what you can do when you're debugging, for how you're going to how you can structure your workflow, and a bit about I'll show some few examples in Vivado, some errors and how you're going to handle them. So when you're working in Vivado, probably the first problem that you're going to run into, the first error message that you're going to get is failed due to early errors. And when you run into that for the first time, that's really not a good error message. So let's go into Vivado and I'll recreate the error message and try to show you what to do with it. So I'm back here in Vivado and I just tried to simulate this counter behavioral, and it comes up with the error message that launch simulation failed due to early errors. So now then you press OK. You get some extra error messages here that doesn't really tell you much. It tells you to check the TCL console output. So you can then open the messages view, and then you have the TCL console down here. If you open the TCL console, then you can see the error messages that we saw before are down here marked in red. So if you then go up a bit and read up here, then it says cannot read from out object count. You then go to the end of this line and it says that it comes from your counter object and it comes from line 60. So if we go back into our counter behavioral here, then we can roll down to line 60 and we can see that here this is actually a red line, and it says that the problem is that you're trying to read from an output port. So that's why this is just an error that I introduced to show you an example. But then the purpose here, or the solution here, is to then of course use an internal signal and then the error will disappear. But what you need to remember is that when you get that error, then look in the TCL console and then try to find whichever error, look for the errors in the above script. There's another good hint that sometimes when you work with block designs, then and they just won't work for some reason, they give you an error message that you don't understand what to do with, then there's a button that says reset output products, and this sometimes fixes it. I'll just go into Vivado and show you where to find this button. So I'm back here in Vivado, and so I have a block design here, and if I wanted to reset the output products, I'd right click on the block design here, and then I'd say reset output products and then reset. So this sometimes fixes your problems with block designs. One common problem that you'll probably run into during your work with Vivado is that when you run through all of the generate bit stream, then it's going to say that there's some kind of port that doesn't match the constraint file. So be aware that just check your constraint file matches with your ports, so that you don't run into this problem after sitting and waiting for the bit stream for 5 minutes. Another thing in Vivado is that you can use what I would define as some primitive debugging that actually works really well. So Vivado is a bit weird in the fact that sometimes you can have an error, and then if you just close down Vivado and then turn it back on again, sometimes it disappears. That can fix some errors. Or this is a bit of a tedious solution, but sometimes if you have an error that just won't go away, then you can try to take all of your materials, all of your sources, and then copy them into a new project. This takes some time, but sometimes it can fix the problem. When you're working with Vivado and you've perhaps finished your simulation and everything seems to be working there, be aware that that doesn't mean that it will work when you implement it on your board. When you go from the simulation to the board, there's so many things that can go wrong. And what I specifically recommend to try to debug this is that you hook up an oscilloscope to your board. You can use the oscilloscope to measure the voltages on the different pins to get an idea of what's happening inside your board, since you can't really look inside it. One problem that we encountered in our semester working with Vivado was when you use Vivado's own IPs, there's some of them that, for some reason, at least on some of our computers, didn't work. So specifically, we had problems with the slices and the concatenates. So be critical about Vivado's IPs, and sometimes perhaps try to make your own instead. So when you're working with Vivado, as you've probably already noticed, there's a lot of waiting time. Vivado's always doing something, either it's updating or it's simulating, and it always takes a lot of time. So what I recommend is that you should either take your breaks during these times, or you can have your report on the side and do work on your report, or have some other project that you're working on, so you can switch back and forth and not just sit and stare during your Vivado's waiting time.